Right, so we're now at the part of the meeting where we have our guest speaker, Jay Shabat. I'm delighted he's going to be joining us. Many of you will remember Jay. He is a friend of CILT and has been a sponsor of us in the past as well at events. Now, Jay spoke to us about a year and a half ago about an exciting upcoming merger in the airline industry between JetBlue and Spirit, and gave us also an update on the US airline industry. I think it's fair to say there's probably some news on that merger, and also probably in the last 18 months, a lot of updates to the US airline industry. So Jay has kindly agreed to come back again, and he's going to give us this presentation on the industry. And Jay, I think it's fair to say you're happy to kind of leave time at the end to answer questions from us today as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like this is the sequel to the big movie that you saw 2.5 years ago, whenever it was, or a year and a half ago, right? It's we're gonna find out what happened now if you don't already know.
This is part two, is it, Jay?
Part two. Yeah, this is yeah, and we got some new suspense now too, so there'll be a part three, maybe, hopefully not another year and a half, but we yeah, it's good. Thank you, Andrew. And did you have anything more to say, or should I just jump right in?
I think I've said enough already today, so yeah, the floor's yours.
All good. Yeah, and it's it's cool that we're a pretty small group here, so I would say, even not in addition to leaving time for Q&A, if there's anything that I say that you want to follow up with as I'm going along, I mean, just feel free to jump right in, because we're real small group. I think that's pretty manageable. Yeah, you don't have to wait till the end. So I'm going to just quickly just a quick commercial for my company here. I work for Skift. Skift, you can think of it as the Bloomberg of travel almost. I mean, we cover the travel industry extensively. We have experts not just in airlines, but also in really all aspects of tourism. I mean, hotels and cruises and tour operators and all sorts of stuff like that. And we do host some really good industry events, including an airline themed event that we do in the Dallas-Fort Worth area every fall. And we do, I think they switch back and forth. It's Dallas one year, it's Fort Worth the other year. So I think last year was Fort Worth, this year's Dallas. And we also do what we call the Skift Global Conference every September. It's a great event. So if you're involved at all in the travel ecosystem, would recommend you take a look at that. Most of you guys, I not only know, but even had the privilege of meeting a few of you in New York. It's great. It was the first time I actually met Andrew in the flesh. When was that in New York? It was a couple months ago, right?
Yeah, that was March.
March. Yeah, March. We had a great event in New York. So that was great to meet some of you there. So some of you know that I also write about railroads. That's, I don't know, you call it my little side gig, or however you want to call it. And if you have any, if you want to discuss any recent developments in the railroad industry, some of you know there's been a lot of goings on there too with Norfolk Southern and their, attempted hostile takeover, and lots of fun stuff in the railroad sector too. Always, feel free to, you have my email there. Give me a call. Always happy to, chat about that as well. But today's topic is the airline business, the always exciting airline business. Now, when we talked back in 2022, the fall of 22, we talked about how JetBlue and Spirit, these two sort of, I don't want to say small. I mean, they're let's call them modestly sized airlines. I mean, they're definitely not small. I mean, they're airlines with certainly more than 100 planes. They had agreed to merge after a little bit of a contest involving Frontier. So Frontier Airlines originally made an offer to buy Spirit, and then JetBlue came in, and there was a little bit of bidding war going on. Ultimately, JetBlue and Spirit struck a deal, but when we last spoke, there was a big question mark of whether or not the deal would actually happen. Now, I joke that it's, suspense here. Some of you, I'm guessing that you probably know that the deal ultimately did not happen. And the reason why was the Department of Justice decided that this deal would be anti-competitive, that it would hurt consumers. So they sued and they won the lawsuit. So a judge in Massachusetts back in, I believe it was January, said that, no, you guys cannot merge. So that's kind of where we stand now. There have been a few developments at both airlines since then. JetBlue actually has a new chief executive. They've brought in some other new management to help kind of right the ship, because as you may have heard, JetBlue and Spirit are both. I'm trying to choose my adjectives carefully here. I don't want to say they're in dire straits, but they're Spirit in particular has some very serious financial problems now. And naturally that lends some to, question whether or not the Department of Justice was correct for, pursuing this deal. I'll leave that, up to people who want to debate that, but it's the situation now is that Spirit really does there's even some talk that they may have to file for bankruptcy because they do have a lot of debt, and there are some various strategic challenges that they have, and JetBlue for that matter has as well, which I want to mention a few of them in a moment. Now, will they go bankrupt? I tend to not think so, but just the fact that we're talking about it suggests that, this is not a healthy airline. And let's remember that, or I should explain that during the 2010s, Spirit was one of the most profitable airlines in the world. They have this ultra low cost business model where you guys, I'm sure many of you guys fly Spirit. I'm sure you guys, some of you have. It's, pack in the seats and charge for everything, and it's very much we call it an ancillary revenue driven model. So they don't make I'd say about almost half of their revenues come from not selling the seat itself, but sort of the extras. You got a fee for this and a fee for that, and charge for that and a charge for that. So that model was very successful, but it's run into some problems in the post-pandemic environment. And I'll mention a few. And I was kind of debating before we, started this is, how much should I just dwell on Spirit and JetBlue versus, kind of a broader U.S. airline industry outlook. And I'll do both. I have a slide also for, something broader. I did want to just say a few things about some of the challenges that these guys face, these two guys specifically, because they're not alone in facing these, what I'm about to mention here. So one of them is that there is this severe aircraft shortage, both at Boeing and Airbus, and they're pretty much the only aircraft suppliers in the world. They're a few, Embraer in Brazil, they're in the game also, but their jets are smaller and not terribly relevant here. It's really just Boeing and Airbus. And Boeing, as you know, has all sorts of production problems, and they have this 737 MAX, which is very, very, it's an excellent aircraft. I mean, the economics of it are fantastic. The airlines that fly it, they love it. But as you know, it's had safety issues, production issues, FAA regulatory issues. So these airlines are not getting their planes on time. Now, it just so happens JetBlue and Spirit, neither of those are Boeing customers. They're Airbus customers. But the MAX has a competing product called the A320 family, NEO. NEO just stands for New Engine Option. It's kind of an updated version. And this Airbus plane, also super, super popular, excellent economics, and they've got very, very serious issues with the engine. So Pratt & Whitney, which builds the engine on the Airbus planes that these two guys, JetBlue and Spirit, have ordered, they found some flaw. I can't really explain the engineering behind it, but there was some kind of flaw with what they call powdered metal. So they have to send them back to the shops and redo them. And you would think that, oh, okay, it's, take a couple of weeks. It takes more than a year, actually. And part of the reason for that is that there's also a shortage of maintenance capacity, shortage of maintenance labor, shortage of, just shops around the world. So these guys have been short of aircraft. I mean, they've had to, they've been counting on these new planes. And remember, the newer planes have better economics, lower fuel burn. Sometimes they fly longer, they can do more missions. So they were counting on these planes to lower their costs, and they don't have them. Now, in one sense, it's a good thing because this is affecting the whole industry. And the industry, because it's short on capacity, the fares tend to be going up. You have a situation where I'll get to this next slide, but demand is actually very good right now, generally speaking, and supply is very constrained. So, economics 101, the fares are going up. So in a sense, it's a good thing, but these guys just have a tremendous amount of headaches. Few other things I'll point out about JetBlue and Spirit, which also applies to every U.S. airline. Labor costs have gone up. I'll freely use the word dramatically here. I don't hesitate to use the word very, very big increase in labor costs. So even though fuel prices have actually, last time we spoke in 2022, if you remember, fuel prices were very high, oil prices were very high. And part of that was because Russia had just, the whole Russia-Ukraine event that spiked oil prices in the early part of 2022, and it just kind of kept getting worse. But then 2023, that moderated. And here in 2024, it's still a pretty manageable situation. I mean, no one's going to tell you that, we love where fuel prices are right now. They're cheap, and not that they're cheap, but they're manageable. So hasn't really been an issue. They've come down since 2022. The issue has been labor costs and other costs as well. Airport costs have gone up. As I mentioned, maintenance costs have gone up. So that's another problem. And yes, that's going to affect all airlines. But if you're an airline that has business class seats to China and you can sell one to Andrew's going to pay big bucks for it. So the costs are not quite as burdensome. You can make it up on the revenue side if you're a United, whereas if you don't really have any premium, and JetBlue does have some. JetBlue is a sort of premium airline, but Spirit has basically nothing. So that's been very harmful too. And just the final thing I'll say about these guys is that if you're a low-cost carrier, you really do depend upon growth. It's just a kind of law of airline economics, where as you grow, you get a lot of economies of scale. And if you kind of picture, if you're, paying for a gate at an airport, you have to lease a gate, let's say, Newark Airport, whatever. You have a fixed payment every month. And the airport doesn't care if you fly 10 times a day or 12 times a day or 15 times a day. It's so the more you fly, sort of the lower cost per unit you'll benefit from. So if that makes sense. Now, we've got all these planes that aren't coming because of the delivery delays, as I mentioned. And we've got labor costs going up and things like that. So it's been harder to grow. We've also had issues like air traffic controller shortages. And I think we even talked about that when we spoke a year and a half ago. That's still unfortunately a problem. They've done some stuff to manage it. They've told the airlines in New York, for example, like you have to cut flights because we just don't have the air traffic controllers to handle it. So they've done that, and the operations have gotten better. It's I don't know if any of you have flown recently, but in general, it's smoother out there now than it was in 2022. So I guess I should add one quick note about Frontier, because they were involved in the whole show as well. They are facing some of these same issues. As I mentioned, they're losing money, and they are now sort of pivoting to becoming a slightly more premium airline. And I think we'll see that from Spirit too, where they're now, if you want to buy a fare that, gives you the right to change your date without a fee, or that, there's more options. You have to pay for it, but they also waive change fees on some fares, not all the fares. That was something that a lot of airline passengers were kind of annoyed about. So change fees gone. So that's Frontier. And maybe we'll get a chance to speak about some of the, other airlines in the US as we go on, or if you ask about them. But let me just quickly, I honestly, I think I hit a lot of these already, but all airlines right now, and if you remember in 2022, the industry demand was just starting to come alive after COVID. So there was a bunch of false starts. Like I remember 2021, everybody thought in the fall of that year, okay, we're ready to go, demand's gonna come back. And then there was that, what was that variant? The Delta variant of COVID, remember? And that kind of threw the recovery off track. Then so the winter came and everybody said, okay, we're ready to go again. Looks like, and then that Omicron, remember that thing, the variant, that came. And so people canceled and they didn't fly. Finally, in the spring of 2022 was when things started to really take off and everybody started to come back, and it was gangbusters. And, everybody who was spent, all these, people, these Americans who were, spending money on, at Home Depot or the furniture store, their Pelotons or
Peloton, yeah.
Yeah, that's the metaphor, right? The Pelotons, everybody's buying Pelotons. So everybody was doing that. And then suddenly they switched to buying services. So travel and was the big one. So it was a great summer in 2023. And it's going to be a great summer again in 2024, it looks like. And we kind of already know that because people book in advance, right? So not everybody, but if you listen to United or Delta or American, the way they talk about their summer travel right now, they're saying, yeah, it looks really good. We've already got money, a lot of bookings on record. They've done it, and it's going to be another good summer. We don't know what's going to happen with fuel and all that. Things could always derail. It's the airline business. It could be, some kind of shock or, wars and famines and pestilence. And it's like anything that goes bad in the world, the airlines are always the first to feel it. So it's a horrible business. You guys are lucky you're not in the airline business. I'm assuming you're not, but horrible business. But in any case, it should be a good summer. And it was a good spring. I mean, Easter was really good. It was a big holiday travel period. So demand was good. But you might be kind of confused right now thinking, wait a minute, you just said, Frontier is doing awful. They're losing money. JetBlue is losing money. Spirits is what you just said, demand is great. And I think the problem is that those guys have, as I mentioned, cost issues, aircraft issues. And remember, they're two things. So one, the premium segment of the airline industry is what's really booming. So if you're involved in that a lot, if you're, flying overseas and you have first class cabins, business class cabins, you are going to, I'm just mindful of the time here, you're going to be benefiting now more than if you're just selling, cheap tickets to Florida. And the other thing I was going to mention, speaking of Florida, just as it happens, Spirit, JetBlue, and Frontier were all just piling capacity into Florida. And Delta, being Delta, very smart airline, very strategically wise, they started throwing a lot of capacity into Florida, the Caribbean, Las Vegas as well, these leisure markets. And so even though demand was very good, you had too much capacity in a lot of these markets. So that's why those guys, were having trouble despite the strong demand. Now, as I said, on the supply side, the big story here is the aircraft shortages I just mentioned. That's going to be a problem for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's not going away. And that has to do with, just things going on at Boeing and Airbus and labor. And there's just that's not going away anytime soon. So it's kind of set up. I mean, if you're a Delta or United, you're kind of set up well for the next couple of years, assuming, again, there's no shocks to the system. And, every airline has their own, story, their own unique challenges. But in general, the airline industry is sitting in a rather good place right now. And, we'll see what happens. And I think like the last bullet there, the cost trends, I think I covered that well. Labor, everything going up a lot, except for fuel, as I said, has actually come down a bit. So, we've got another. This is why I said there might be a third movie here, because we've got another suspense, another proposed merger, and more than just proposed. It's actually a done deal. Alaska has agreed to buy Hawaiian Airlines, and the only question now is, will the Department of Justice again step in and sue? And then if they do, would the courts agree? We don't know. I tend to think there's, it's a very active Justice Department right now when it comes to antitrust. They just sued, I think this week, was it Ticketmaster with Live Nation Ticketmaster?
Yeah,
Did you guys
Live
see that?
Nation. Yeah,
Yeah, did you guys see that? So they're very active. They're going after a lot of these deals, mergers that they feel are, consumer harmful to consumers. I don't know what they'll say. My hunch is that they won't. I mean, this is should be somewhat of a smaller merger than Spirit and Frontier, and they don't overlap as much. I mean, I think the big concern for DOJ with Spirit, JetBlue, was that they overlapped a ton in Florida, for example. So there was really little question that fares would be, pressured upwards. I mean, if you were someone like me who likes to escape the northern winters and go to Florida, it was probably there probably was something to that it might have been harmful to consumers. Alaska, Hawaii, there's some overlap and not much. So that could, I think that could go through, but we don't know yet. What's the logic? I hesitate to go through. I'll wait. If you want to know more about this merger, we can talk about it in Q&A. I see it's already 5:45, so I won't say much other than to say that Alaska is not based in Alaska. Don't be fooled. It's actually based in Seattle. Alaska is an important market for them, but they're based in Seattle, and Seattle is a superstar U.S. economy. All the tech firms you could think of, Amazon is headquartered there, and Microsoft is headquartered there, and just not only do you have the economic growth, you have the population growth. So it's just been like an all-star economy and therefore an all-star hub. And Alaska has been super successful there. They've been less successful expanding in other markets like California, where there's more competition. They feel like they need to find new avenues of growth. And one reason is that the Seattle airport is it's getting really capacity constrained. They're not going to be able to squeeze too much juice out of Seattle any longer. So what they're thinking, Hawaiian, for example, has these wide body Dreamliner planes, these 787s. If they can use those to maybe fly from Seattle to Europe, that's something new and it's growth because those are bigger aircraft. So there's some logic there. Another simple reason was that Hawaiian was really cheap. Hawaiian is going through more problems than even the ones I mentioned at JetBlue and Spirit. One of them being is that Japan, tourists from Japan coming to Hawaii was really that is a very, very big part of their business. Unfortunately, not so many Japanese people are coming to Hawaii anymore because it's very expensive. The exchange rate is really bad. The yen is very weak. And hotels in Hawaii, from what I understand, have gotten really expensive as well. So Hawaiian, their stock price went way, way down. And Alaska said, all right, let's swoop in and, maybe we can get a bargain here. So let's see what the DOJ ultimately, says or doesn't say. Here is this is for 2013, the operating margin for the 12 largest airlines in the US. These are basically your only players. Number 7, SkyWest is kind of don't even think about them there. It's basically the big guys kind of outsource capacity to outsource flying to these guys. So you can ignore SkyWest, sorry, if you want. Sun Country, who the heck is that? Small airline, doing really well out of Minneapolis. Very unique business model, similar to Allegiant, actually. You can see of the big boys, Delta is, they're always right on top. So, and some of I wrote a history book on Delta Airlines. So if you're interested in how they became so strong after going through bankruptcy not too long ago, that's kind of the essence of the book. It's called Glory Lost and Found. And you can see their Hawaiian is at the bottom, but not too far away from, Spirit and JetBlue and Frontier also in the red there. I think, yeah, it made it through. So we're at the Q&A, and I apologize. I know it didn't leave too much time, but fire away. What do you guys want to know?
Yeah, can you talk briefly about Americans' jaded relationship with JetBlue, and now JetBlue's cozying up to British Airways, And I read one article that claimed that that was to spark more interest from American again. So I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, thanks for asking, because American has been all that I've been doing this week. Uh, they have been in the news for other reasons related to a very flawed distribution strategy that they had. They angered a lot of their customers, and they're doing a full U-turn on that strategy now. They fired their chief commercial officer, but that's not what you asked about. American, yes, good point. So they also had a close alliance or joint venture with JetBlue, American JetBlue, and that was to cover. American was kind of weak in the Northeast. They had problems making money in New York, and they have a hub in Philadelphia, but it has some challenges. So, and then JetBlue wanted bigger scope. They're domestic focused airline or short haul focused. So they got together and they basically did kind of a quasi merger of just the northeastern quadrant, the U.S. And guess what? The Department of Justice, they sued and they won. And about a year ago, I believe, that whole thing fell apart. So American still has some relationship with JetBlue. There, could that be revived again? Maybe if there's a new administration, new Justice Department, who knows? Now JetBlue is flying. I think the British Airways thing, I wouldn't read too much into that. JetBlue is now flying to London. It always helps to have partners on sort of the other end when you're doing that. So I think that's why. Now, British Airways and American are very, very close as well. They're joint venture partners across the Atlantic. So there's, a lot of relationships going back and forth there. So maybe we haven't seen the end of that story. Maybe American and JetBlue will ultimately do something again someday. It's hard to rule that out. But for now, American, it's basically, that's all done. No, for JetBlue, no Spirit, no American, you're on your own. That's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. I actually had thought about mentioning that and I forgot. So thanks for mentioning that, Jeff.
Jay, a question here on the ultra low cost carriers. By the time you add all of the ancillary revenue, the pay toilet and everything else, does the actual cost of travel pretty much match the mainline carriers? I live on American, maybe half coach, half first class, but you're comparing the cost of a coach seat. By the time all's said and done, is a Spirit passenger paying the same thing I am?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair question. I would say that for a lot of people, you can save money on those carriers. And I know I fly Frontier a lot, and it just so happens that they're the only airline that flies from Trenton Airport, which is like 10 minutes from my house. So, and otherwise I fly Philadelphia, which I would be American because they're the big guys there. And I do find that I can save money on Frontier if I'm not checking a bag, if I don't care about a seat assignment, if I don't care. It's true, if you're someone, maybe you're flying for business or whatever, or you just, you have to work on a flight and you need comfort, and you do need you want the window seat, or you have a couple bags that you need to check, then you're absolutely right. You're probably not going to do that much better. Now, keep in mind that American, United, Delta, they have these things called basic economy fares, which were kind of they're basically ultra low cost carrier fares. That was kind of their weapon against them. And they used them sparingly. Like, you can't always get them. And if you do get them, you're not going to get loyalty. Sometimes you get loyalty points. Every policy is different, but you're not, you got to pay extra for everything. And I've done that too. Sometimes I've flown American on basic economy and it's fine. But yeah, I mean, I think to directly answer your question, Arthur, you can, in many situations, save money because they do offer a lot, low base fares. The only final thing I'll add, sorry to be so long-winded here, but for a while, the ultra low cost carriers, particularly Spirit and Frontier, they were jamming so much capacity into Florida that they had no other choice but to offer heavy discounts during peak season, no less. So I was able to go to Florida twice, to escape the winter here this winter, and I got incredible deals on Frontier. I flew Frontier both times, and they weren't always matched by the big guys. So yeah, you can find deals.
Mm-hmm. One of the things American is doing, when I look to book a flight, the first fares that come up is basic economy. Mm. So it's almost a bait and switch. Oh, you're going to be able to fly for $200
Yeah.
unless you want a chair.
Yeah, and use the bathroom and right, and land safely. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they are marketing that as well. So it's really, it's what you're looking for. And frankly, for a lot of passengers, you fly what's convenient. I fly Frontier, honestly, the biggest reason I fly Frontier a lot is because they're at Trenton. The biggest reason why Andrew probably flies American a lot is because he's flying to, I guess,
Well,
Dallas trips and Miami trips and things. So it's, it depends on where you live. You got, Arthur, you live in Dallas. It's even if you didn't tell me that you flew American, I know you fly American because you live in Dallas.
Yeah.
Hey, don't forget about Southwest.
I was
Jay.
going to say
Also
maybe
based in
Southwest,
London.
if you fly domestically, Southwest,
Yeah.
but if you're going overseas or looking for some amenities, it's got to be American. Different airlines have their own kind of strongholds. Obviously, Delta is the master of Atlanta, and Atlanta is the most profitable hub in the United States, maybe even the world. I don't think there's any question about that. And I would argue probably Dallas Fort Worth is number 2. I mean, American does great there. Also, superstar economy, fast growing, population. So awesome hub. Unfortunately, American has some less than awesome hubs too, but that's another story.
So Jay, question for me. So there's been something in the news. I'm sure the fact that it's an election year is just coincidence. About junk fees and
I thought you were going to talk about that. I thought you were going to raise the Trump conviction, which I just had. My phone is blowing up here, but
I thought you were going to say that.
well, that's for
really?
another.
No. Now let's
Good.
keep
Okay,
on
good.
topic.
We keep away from the politics. Yeah, let's go. Okay.
The junk, so a focus on junk fees, hidden costs, more transparency, and airlines kind of come up to the top of the queue in terms of people that are offenders there. So you mentioned about Spirit and Frontier maybe kind of changing their model. Is it just a reaction to kind of the fact that they probably have to do that?
I want to say no. You can't necessarily take things at face value, but pretty much every airline, when asked about that, said those new regulations or proposed regulations, it's not going to be that big of a deal. They all kind of say, yeah, we'll maybe it'll cost them on the margins, here and there, but I don't think it's going to affect anybody's business model. So that's my kind of straightforward answer to that. Yeah, it's a good question because a lot of people have been asking that question actually, but I tend to think it's maybe not much ado about nothing, but much ado about very little.
Okay, right. So we've probably got time for one more question for Jay, if anyone has one.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll chime in. A few weeks ago, there was quite a bit in the news about the airlines being required to pay compensation for delayed flights. Which to me means that they're going to jack up the fares. I was stuck in Newark overnight, and then I was 8 hours late out of Boston, 3 or 4 weeks ago. Is that something that's really going to happen? And is that likely to affect the fare that somebody's got to pay for it?
Sure. I mean, yeah, that's ultimately it's if the airlines can pass it through in markets where they have pricing power, they will. Now there already are some, and there have been for years now, some regulations that for example, fine an airline if they're trapping people on the tarmac for a long time. That was like there was a couple of high profile incidents of that in the early 2000s. There's rules on compensation, things like that. And you're right to bring it up because the Biden administration has been I don't know if they've been approved, but yeah, there are some new ones out there. And I think it's kind of the same answer to Andrew's question is I don't think airlines are terribly concerned about it. There's nothing too draconian or too costly or anything that will disrupt their operational models or anything like that. I would not expect it, don't think that because of this new regulation that, oh, okay, I'm going to be paying 20% more fare. It just doesn't work like that because remember, that the fares you're paying have a lot to do with, one, the competition in the market you're flying, and two, which can change overnight. You know, one day your fare could drop 20%, even though fuel prices go up 20% just because of competition. And then I mentioned fuel prices. That's another big thing. When fuel prices tend to be high, there's a lag, but that's when you tend to see the fare, you know, flying get real expensive when you have high fuel prices, as it was in 2022. So, you know, flying has been, you know, pretty reasonable. There's been definitely some attempts to push through some fare increases to compensate for some of these labor costs and maintenance costs, et cetera, that I mentioned earlier. So I wouldn't say flying is cheap, but the fact that fuel prices are down have kind of moderated things a little bit. And it's not like, don't think of it like, as, you know, some of you guys are in the railroad industry where the freight railroads, you know, they don't even care what fuel prices are because they have so much pricing power that they just levy surcharges. And, you know, there's a time lag, but it doesn't affect their profits at all, essentially.
Well,
So,
careful, there's a lot of antitrust litigation over that, and I won't say anything else.
okay, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and that's actually that comes up in the airlines too, with like antitrust issues. On there's actually a I believe, Andrew, when did you say the CILT AGM? Is it next week or?
Yeah, next month. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the IATA, which is the International Air Transport Association, their meeting, oh, you said next month, sorry. The IATA AGM general meeting is actually next week in Dubai. And my colleagues are actually going over there. And that's an issue that they're always, you know, they have to dance around a little bit, you know.
Skate
When
around.
people show up at this meeting, you have all these airline CEOs. Are they talking prices? Are they colluding? So
Yeah.
it's very sensitive issue.
So Jay, well, thank you very much indeed for, you know, the Q&A session and giving us even more insights. That was an excellent presentation. Maybe there will be a part 3. We'll definitely kind of invite you back if you're prepared to do that, to talk about airlines with us.
Anything.
But in the meanwhile, yeah, thank you ever so much for doing that. This recording we're going to put on the CILT website and our YouTube channel. So if there's anybody you think might be interested in the topics that we covered today, please forward that to them. I'll send that out in the notes for this meeting. Well, I think that just leaves me to wish everybody a wonderful evening. Enjoy what's left of May, and see you all on the 27th of June for our next session. AI in transportation with Bob Hitt is going to be our speaker then. So
yep, and thanks for me as well. And also, I just wanted to last call here just to remind you, if you have want to discuss any of this, you have my email now, and Andrew knows where to find me if you need. So yeah, by all means, reach out.
that really appreciated, Jay. Thank you very much for that. Okay, cheers everyone. Good night.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Night.
Thank you.
Bye.